Matt live on Scourge of War Digital.
Alright, Matt, what are we seeing here?
Well, currently we have the Prussians.
Is this our first sign of the Prussians in the Scourge of War Waterloo?
Coming from the east side. At the moment we're intercepting orders. What they're doing is they're coming in and we need to attack them, or not attack them, defend them on this point.
So your mission is to really delay the or hold up the Prussians?
Yeah.
Right, so this is one of the core size scenarios. So Matt is in control of a very sizable army, much more, or many more troops than he would be able to control by himself. So how are you going about delegating?
Is this a combined arms force as well? Because
yes,
because Ian was saying earlier that the French organisation was very much to make each corps have a mix of cavalry, artillery, and infantry.
Exactly.
So what I plan on doing is to send issues to the to each of my kind of brigade leaders, and then they'll then send orders out to their troops, as you can see the courier's doing now.
Right, can you focus on the Prussians for a second, see what they got here?
Yeah.
What they are bringing at you, because on the mini map it looked like a whole bunch of troops, and we see some.
It do seem to be an awful lot of Prussians.
Yes.
So if you're just joining us, we are broadcasting live the Battle of Waterloo. We've been refighting it all day since 10:30. We're now, where are we? 5.5 hours into the battle. There's still around 3 hours left to go, I think. Am I getting my times wrong? No, I think it's still about 3 hours left to go. So this is a pretty long engagement. We started at Hougoumont, where the French had some early success. That was on the Allied right, and then on the Allied left, again, the French had some success around the town of Papelotte, capturing both of those. But since then, things have not been going so well for the French. Their main assault with d'Ailron's corps against the British line really, it got slightly further than it did historically, but took horrendous casualties, and as a result could not hold its position. And the French have really been beaten back there. And a cavalry attack initiated by Ney on the Allied right went forward without any infantry and artillery support, and again that's been pretty roundly defeated by the British. So now here we have, later in the day, the Prussians are arriving. Luckily for the French, they have to deploy through a relatively narrow area, so the French are hopefully going to be able to stall them before to allow the French to have another go at the main British line before the main weight of Prussian forces arrive. So that's where we are, and Matt has the job of holding up the Prussians.
Right, he's doing a great job so far, because he sent forward his cavalry initially. That forces the Prussian infantry into a square, which is like a very static formation.
Yeah,
obviously.
really slows them down.
So that gives him the option to use that time to deploy his own infantry in a proper defensive position, and I think that's what he's
because the
attempting
victory
to do.
conditions for this scenario, they related to just holding this position for as long as possible. So
exactly.
As long as he can delay the Prussians whatever way he can, then that's a win.
So we got some fighting going on in the trees here.
What I'm trying to do is just cover any kind of skirmish line that they might try and take around to my flanks, in order to somehow maneuver around to me. And you can see a lot of the main fighting is in the middle here.
Yeah, so your advanced troops, your advanced cavalry is facing theirs.
Yeah.
So which commander is Matt playing in this scenario?
He is playing the commander of the 6th French Corps, which is
Le Beau.
Yes. Georges Mouton contre le Beau. Wow, beautiful.
Your French accent is very good.
It's very convincing, except for French people listening. They're tearing their ears out. Right, so your troops are slowly moving up now.
Yeah.
So Matt has about an hour to hold up this attack, and depending on how much he stalls this, the Prussians should be arriving at Plancenoit about 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock local time in Waterloo. So in just less than an hour from now. So we'll see how that goes.
Right.
And then the last scenario that we'll be looking at later on will be Napoleon's Imperial Guard Last Stand, which is famously goes down in history where they refused to surrender and the artillery was brought up to basically annihilate them. So we'll have to see later if that's what happens, but still a lot left to come. And we also have Ian Dickey, our historical expert. He'll be giving us a really interesting rundown of the medic and surgery and infirmier systems. He's brought a lot of interesting equipment that we're going to have a look at later.
Right, so there's quite a lot to come for now. At the moment, though, Matt should really focus on getting his infantry line together. I think there's skirmishing going on in the forest to his left. You might want to check what's going on there, because I think I saw some artillery firing at you from that position as well. There they are. So they brought up their artillery very close to you, but relatively lightly supported, so you might be able to take those out and deal with them very early in the battle.
So what's this splitting battalion? So you can break your units into smaller formations?
You can break your units into smaller formations indeed, so that you can cover more ground or more flanks, especially in forests. You might want to have more smaller formations, moving around, getting proper cover. It's also a mechanic the AI uses to deploy skirmishers automatically.
Okay. When you're controlling so many men, breaking into smaller formations, is that a good thing to do or is that inadvisable?
It very much depends on the size of battle you're controlling. In this case, controlling an entire corps, it makes your job a bit harder.
Yeah, because you've got so much else to think about. There's just too many things to worry about.
If you don't do it and you leave it to the AI, the AI will automatically deploy skirmishers, do it for you, and manage them.
So that's more something that you'd want to get into if you're trying to do direct command of a small part of the
exactly,
battlefield.
yes. Then it might be very useful. For example, if you face like one enemy line and they split up so they can flank you, then you're inclined to either facing one, you will be at a disadvantage. So you might want to split up as well to.
Yeah, so if you're being flanked, and you could split into 2 units, face them both off, which is probably better off than
exactly
one unit being flanked from one side. Bart, could you just run through the basics of the game for people that maybe have joined us later or didn't hear some of the other explanations, things like how the command layers work?
Right. So yeah, Scourge of War is in essence, or Scourge of War Waterloo is a real-time strategy game set during the Battle of Waterloo, and it lets you recreate all kinds of engagements that took place during the Battle of Waterloo, as well as a number of hypothetical engagements you can recreate with like the skirmish mode or the sandbox mode. And what it does, and it makes you feel like really a commander on the battlefield, because rather than with more traditional RTS games where you have direct control of all your units, here you are very much dependent on your subordinates to carry out your orders in the way that they see fit, and you have to trust them to make the right choices to do the right thing. In addition, there's also a significant delay in control of your troops, because all your orders are actually being carried by couriers from your position to the position of the officers that have to get the orders.
That's a really interesting part, because the positioning of your general is really key. So if you're too far, if you're trying to issue orders to someone at the other end of your line, the delay in them receiving that order can be really large. So deciding where you put your general really determines where you're going to be able to give more rapid commands.
Exactly, and in some of the bigger battles like we see here, this is like a corps-sized battle, so Matt is in control of an entire corps. So he might give an order to have a division move up. So he would give an order to his division commander. The division would then order his brigades individually, and those brigade commanders will give their orders to all the infantry lines we see moving. So it's not just your distance to the one that's receiving the order, it's also all in between. There is a delay going on. So moving an entire army is very cumbersome to do, and that's why it's often advisable to let some AI commanders take control of their own and let them do what they consider the best thing.
One of the things you told us about earlier was that you can schedule commands, so you can issue orders to execute at a certain time.
Yep.
So you quite often hear about the generals synchronizing their clocks before the battle, so they were all in sync, because there was no kind of global clock in those days. And so then you would say at 10 o'clock launch your attack on
exactly
on 11, the assault and here will go in. So they had a predefined plan.
Yep.
Because for the very reason that distributing these orders during the battle was a very complicated process.
Yes, and very risky as well, because as we've seen before, these couriers can actually be intercepted or be killed on the way.
So there's two downsides to that. So if your courier gets intercepted, one, the order you've issued doesn't arrive.
Yep.
And two, your enemy can actually see the order that was being issued, and that gives them intelligence on what your plans were. So
exactly.
What you'll notice is from time to time you'll get pop-ups on the screen with couriers that have been intercepted from the enemy, and you might gain some useful information about what the your opponent is up to. And one of the other really interesting things about the command layer system is how it feeds into multiplayer.
Yep.
So you can have up to 32 players, 16 aside, and you can have different players commanding different levels of the structure. So you might have one player who's Napoleon, you might have corps commanders, and you might have divisional commanders under him. And the orders get transferred down the command chain by the generals, and sometimes orders may be misinterpreted or executed incorrectly, and all sorts of interesting and unusual situations can come up.
Exactly, and there can also be, like, especially in multiplayer, if you're playing like a division commander, your corps commander might tell you one thing, but perhaps Napoleon wants to do something very specific.
The other thing you have to, when you're dealing with real people, you also have to take into account how they convey themselves. Ian had a very interesting story about something earlier where an American and a British general were working together. Ian's back. I can't remember which battle you were saying that was from.
It's the Korean War, so 1950s.
The Korean War, so obviously much more recent, but the principle still holds true, that the British commander said that he was in a little bit of trouble, and that basically meant he was in really, really deep trouble, but he was very understating it. And the American commander interpreted it as there wasn't really a problem. And so the communication between human players can be really complex. You end up with very unusual things happening. And we also mentioned earlier how messages can get confused as well. So there was a famous message that was sent, send reinforcements, we're going to advance. And because that was repeated verbally through a number of people, by the time it arrived at its destination, the order had become send 3 and 4 punts, we're going to a dance. And obviously that's not a very useful command to get during the middle of a battle.
No. Enormously funny though, in a
It
game.
is. Especially if it would be intercepted.
Yes.
So what we have here is we're jumping back in, the Prussians are now arriving in force. See the Prussian columns arriving down the road. Matt's job is to hold them up really. No expectation of defeating them, but his objective at the moment is just to hold them back long enough so that hopefully the French attack can go in, defeat the British line once and for all, and well, what happens next, who knows.
Yeah, we got the French 6th Corps over here fighting. So Matt's aligning some of his troops in squares now, I see.
Did you order the squares, Matt, or is that the AI just reacting to cavalry?
AI reacting to cavalry.
There's a cavalry threat on the Prussian side.
Alright, yep.
Oh yeah, I can see the cavalry.
Fortunately, they're also firing at you with their infantry, so they're using proper combined arms there.
Yes. And it's not uncommon to see the cavalry use a faint charge like that to force the enemy into square, so they make a better target for the missile troops, the artillery and infantry.
I almost feel like in one of these denser battles that the threat of cavalry is worth more than the actual charge.
It is, yeah. It seems very rare that the cavalry actually get into the infantry. It's mostly a psychological thing.
It's the advantage of the cavalry is they force the infantry into this formation. The infantry then get broken or forced to retreat by the artillery and musketry, and then you launch the cavalry in a massive pursuit. And it's in the pursuit that most.
So we've got a technical issue.
Game sound.
The game sound is off. How did that happen? What sound level should the sound be on? Game sound be on?
About the 3rd block. Yeah, about that. Turtle. People, please give some feedback on the sound balancing here.
Sorry about that.
Got too many buttons to click. We told you something would go wrong. Sorry, Ian, you were saying something.
I was saying something. Oh yes. Cavalry force the infantry into square. The artillery and musketry inflict serious casualties and then start to run away. and then you actually launch the cavalry, not as a head-on charge, but as an exercise in slaughter of the guys running away.
So the cavalry really didn't often fight a kind of an equal fight. They were really there to punish the retreating force and
they
lock them
did
up.
because they did get into serious head-on clashes because they were the most mobile reserve that the generals had. So
Right.
if you had nothing at a particular spot and you needed something there quickly, you had to send the cavalry because everybody else was going to war. And the cavalry could go to a chop and get there in 20 miles an hour or whatever.
How would it have worked in this period? Because in earlier periods, people were expected to buy their own horses, so only the rich were, the cavalry were the nobles or the richer members of society. And this period were people provided horses or?
Yes, they provided horses. The officers might have their own mounts which they could bring, but basically the average cavalry trooper was provided with a mount and everything else he needed for his underwear army.
Right, so it wasn't no longer a nobility thing. It was very much
No, because
average soldier
you
could be a
needed
cavalry
too
man.
many of them. You needed tens of thousands of cavalry to operate in these kind of circumstances, and there would not have been enough nobility.
So your nobility was just your officers then.
Pretty much, yes. Except in France, where they chop their heads off. Mind you, some of ours behave like pepper sprayers. It's a bit dramatic, isn't it?
So how's it going for you, Matt?
Not too well, I don't think. To be honest.
The French story has been getting worse and worse as we go through the day.
You're buying time. And at the end of the day, Matt, you're doing what the Emperor tells you to do. And if the Emperor's plan was, dare I say, faulty, there's no evil point.
And you can explain that to him later.
I should write it in a letter.
Oh, sorry for that, guys.
Reflex kicked in. I need to scratch my nose.
So we see Prussian columns moving
There are an awful lot of Prussian infantry there.
and the
Yeah.
problem is the longer you wait, the more pouring in.
Yeah. Yeah, time is not on your side.
No, it's really not.
So can you get some of your cavalry up to face up against their cavalry? Maybe help your guys get out squares and not getting threatened so much, or sort of murdered so much. See artillery shells bursting as well, but I can't see where the Prussian artillery actually is.
They had some
In
hidden
the
artillery
farthest-
in the forest.
Is that over there? Oh, quite. They do have a fair range then, the artillery.
There were some.
Oh, your Prussians behind you. I can't lost my bearings. The Prussians.
They're out flanking through the
What was
forest.
that? So where's your position? That's your position. Okay, so there are some Prussians on your left that have to be quite far forwards.
Yes.
Yeah, there are a lot more Prussians to come.
So this is really like retreating battle, more about bending your own lines rather than letting them break.
But from the point of view of playing tactical games, which is what this is, whether it's on the tabletop or on the screen, fighting a running retreat can actually be just as challenging or more challenging than a normal head-on battle like Waterloo is in the round. But then I like a challenge.
No, each battle in this game is set to. You won't be able to, like, for example, the cavalry charge we saw earlier. There's no way you can rout every British unit out there and take full control of the hill. But the challenge is measuring up to what happened historically. Can you improve upon what happened historically, even though that doesn't mean you get a total victory?
Yeah, the victory
immediately.
condition is not expecting you to have annihilated the British army with 5 squadrons of cavalry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the process is such a good icon that you could set it up. Could you set it up both sides to AI?
That I don't know.
Yes, you can set up a core battle and you play as Napoleon and you let the entire core be handled by
Okay,
AI.
so you could set a general instruction to
Yeah.
say just advance and then sit back and watch how the corps commander executes that
So
order.
you can say attack that position, defend that position, or even defend but probe the enemy, depending on what you want to do.
Come on, chase those Prussian cavalry down there.
Go for it.
Get his guys into square. Come on, push your cavalry forwards, Matt. Come on.
Come on, Matt. Come on, you can do it, Matt. Go on. Score!
Oh look, you've gone into march.
intercepted.
You want to go into line with the cavalry, I think. That mark,
Yeah.
that's a movement formation. You want to get fighting on that. Yeah, that's into line. Yeah.
You want to get into line, and when you see like one of these symbols above the unit, like the targeting circle, that means they're in range for a charge, basically. So you then right-click the flag, or the charge button should come up.
Charging into an infantry melee, surely that must be something fairly good to do with cavalry.
If you can avoid hitting your own troops.
Very practical.
Put a lot of bodies around.
From what I understand, during Waterloo, the infantry melees were more one unit gaining the advantage, charging, and forcing the other unit to break rather than two equal parties.
Most of them ran away before they got into those.
Right.
The French surgeon Larrey counted up the different wounds that he had to treat at the Battle of Jena. There's other stories about it as well, but the great majority of the wounds were cold steel to the back, which is basically people
Right, running away.
The majority of people killed because they broke. Yeah. Yeah, but morale has always been such an important part of. Oh, come on, charge that line.
Charge!
There you go.
Well, let's go. Come on, that must do something.
They turn
Oh,
around.
his
and
cavalry's
around.
coming into you as
Yeah.
well. Ah, his cavalry's distracted you. So close.
Well,
Well,
cavalry
you're slowing him
managed
down though.
to do a great number of casualties actually. If you see the casualty counter,
Where's the casualty counter?
Enemy casualties shot up.
117 inflicted.
Now if we can
You're in column, get out of column. Get into line.
Oh,
wait,
There
there
he
it
goes,
goes.
quickly. Oh, there.
morale's dangerously low there.
Broken off. Cavalry on the right.
So far though, I think you're halfway through the battle and the line is still holding.
Barely. It's gonna last much longer though. What I wanted to have was have these cannons come round and then fire across, but they weren't protected enough to be able to do that.
Line looks a little bit. What's happened on this side with the Prussians? It looks like you've pushed them back. Don't see as many Prussians on the left-hand side as before.
Nope,
Seems to be general advance.
that's a good thing.
So historically, what happened when the Prussians started to meet the French in?
It's not as well documented as the interaction with the British, simply because Russian sources are in German, and I don't think there are as many of them. The Prussians, they had to. The road went past a burning village, that held them up. They had narrow lanes, which meant the formations were constricted going through those, that held them up. So they did take a long time to arrive on the edge of the battlefield, and the strength built up slowly. So there was this.
It does feel like that. It seems like they arrived quite early, and it really taking a long time to have any real impact on the battle.
And French outposts in that direction did their best, as Matt is doing, to hold up ever increasing numbers in difficult terrain, which is the kind of place you want to hold things up. But eventually they did get through. They got right the way round to Planchenoir, which is behind the French battle line with Wellington. He sent the young guard into Planchenoir to throw them out. They succeeded, and then they were rejected in turn. They went back in. They succeeded. They were rejected in turn.
So basically, this battle that Matt's fighting now, the French effectively lost and were pushed back, and the Prussians moved through and then came on to Planchenoir.
Yes. Right at the beginning of the day, we were doing really well as the French pulling Wellington's reserves away from the centre. What's happening now is that the Prussians are pulling away Napoleon's reserves from the centre to this flank in ever-increasing numbers, and Napoleon is just slowly running out of men.
I can't keep up with the advance that they're pushing
Yeah,
forward.
lots of them. That's quite intimidating.
There are, and right now I have no idea what to do about
Can
it.
you leave a square there and abandon the rest? Run with the rest back. Try and form another line in the forest, maybe. And how much protection would the forest be against cavalry? Is it any use at all?
Forests are very variable. You have open parkland type forest, which is almost what's depicted here, which would impede them a little bit and break up their formation, cavalry formation, but not slow them up a great deal. And then you have dense, impenetrable forests. There was one at Quatre-Bras, the Allied right wing of Quatre-Bras was rested on a wood. They could get infantry through the paths in the wood, but not cavalry. And
Right.
that was great help. It stopped the French cavalry cutting off the reinforcements to the Allied line. So the answer is they could block it completely, or they could
Really depends
not
on the forest.
It depends on the nature of the forest. And this forest historically was enough to impede the Prussian advance, but obviously it varies in density. So it's going to. Actually, I think Matt, Ian is right. If you put a square out and let it do its best,
Yeah.
and then pull the others back and leave another square, so they have to successively overcome.
Take
one
Each
of
time
these
have to bring up the
square,
infantry,
yeah.
deploy, and I wouldn't want to be the guys in the square though.
No, it's not a good job.
I'm not sure, would
but
they actually obey that instruction if you said, you stay here, we're off?
It's
I think
difficult.
that's what I'm trying at the moment.
Faced with the option of running away and risking being cut down by the enemy's cavalry.
Or certain death if you stand. It's not really much of a
Either.
choice, is it?
But where would you rather stand? Die alone in the forest with a sword in the back?
Yeah.
Or die with your mates
I
around
guess
you
the
taking
guys
some of the enemy
really
with you?
didn't know much about what was going on. They probably so much noise and confusion. They probably didn't really know how badly outnumbered they were.
One of the phenomena I've noticed in reenactments, I think it was probably 95 at Waterloo, they built a mock-up of the Hay Saint, and the French were tasked with attacking it. And we did. We formed a big long line and we all went forward, and nobody noticed in the last minute that some Prussian cavalry with lances appeared on our left flank as if somebody had dropped them from
Just
the
didn't
sky.
see them coming.
Nobody saw them coming. We weren't in square, we weren't ready for them. If it were not make-believe, we would have been in total, we'd
Yeah.
have been marvelised.
And were you guys using the smoke on the battlefield?
There was smoke on the battlefield, but the smoke wasn't enough to impede the vision. It was
In a
just
real
that
battle, would it
we-
probably been more
no,
smoke, more guns? And
Yes, there would have been more smoke, more guns, but we were focused on what we'd been tasked to do,
Right.
to the exclusion of everything else.
Yeah.
And I think it's like it's a bit like car crashes. Things slow down, and you only see the thing you're going to hit, or it's going to hit you, and not the things around you.
Your attention kind of focuses in on the immediate
Yes.
threat rather than the peripheral vision disappears.
Yes.
So Matt, what's your plan now? You're trying to pull back, but the guys are kind of refusing to leave their square and pull back. Oh, it looks like some of them have pulled
I've
back.
got some of them to pull back and form lines.
Are you getting an increased level of disobedience to you?
I'm not quite sure. It's all a bit much. at the moment
They've seen
to
how
try
many of
and
his men he's
control.
already killed, and they've now refusing to take orders from him.
I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
think Matt's getting a bit tired and emotional.
Matt's used to winning. He played the first two scenarios where the
I
French
did.
had major victories.
He did really well. I was
Yeah, I'm not
impressed.
used to this.
That's why there's the big force.
No, there's no old guard here. I wouldn't have thought, is it, that the old guard would have been allocated to the middle of the battlefield?
It was historically, and I think that's, judging by the tabletop game, that's what's going to happen there as well. Because they're having a problem with the Prussians coming in on French right, just as we are here.
They've had a very similar situation on the tabletop. The Diarons were attacked and got massacred. They're coming up the hill, And
You take some offence in that, saying it's similar to what happened.
yeah, I mean, I guess it means that all these rule systems are getting a somewhat realistic representation of reality.
So they've had enough.
What, the officers?
Yeah.
That's the officer that's just left them. Hasn't
Yeah.
it?
Well, the officers like to.
It's just such a dense formation against artillery. Lovely
That
target.
would be lovely. Unfortunately, my artillery is
Be pushed out by the
Legging
cavalry.
running away. There's
There's one French square standing in front of a Prussian army.
it'd be nice to just
They're very brave.
just right across there.
Croix de Guerre for that lot. Croix de Guerre is the French Medal of Honor. For those of you.
I think you should leave one more square and run back and form a line where you can get your artillery somewhere useful. Wouldn't advance. You're hitting the wrong way. Might be going backwards. What's the actual? Can we see the casualties that have been received? Where's your overall commander? So that's
It
your
looks like it's
number of
lost
men left.
Yeah.
So that's 6,400 men left out of 3,000 casualties. So you've lost a third of your men. And the numbers changing quite rapidly.
Yeah.
How's the left-hand flank looking? That's looking relatively good.
You have to get into the woods to harvest the right down.
Yeah, it's hard to keep on top of it when you've got this free camera mode. I'm trying to imagine how confusing it would be if you could just see what you could see. And all the information is coming in via couriers from the rest of the battlefield.
Do you know what you could do? You could play a computer game with that set up, couldn't you?
You could, yeah, if you
just,
wanted.
just like that, and
Well,
it
wouldn't
would
it
be
be great?
really, it would be really confusing.
It'd be very
Because
interesting to try
that-
just
the
to get a
system-
feel for it.
The system really worked on command being devolved. I mean, Napoleon's at the top. He divides the strategy, attack Hougoumont, and then the second continue.
And then he relied on the local commanders.
He
to enforce
relied on
that.
the local corps commander, who in turn relied on the local brigadier, and the brigadier's got 6 units each with his own colonel or officer in charge, and they've got to take the decisions: form square, form column of attack, form column of march. That's really the way it has to work. Because
When you're
within-
playing a game like this, it has to be like that because there's no way you could micromanage these individually.
well, that's why the AI is so brilliant.
It is.
Sorry, was that complimentary?
The AI is very good. You can see the way it's taking Matthew apart.
I think it's I was going to say it's more clever than Matthew.
But what I'm now attempting to do is force these guys to just charge through. 'cause
Just
why
bring them
not?
up. Put those guys, the Russians into square maybe. That should slow them down a bit longer. How much longer have you got to hold on for? Is there a time?
What's the time there?
If you could get them to
I can't
show
see it.
themselves in a feint or a threat.
1739.
To force the Prussians into squares.
Yes. Simply
Yeah.
because it stops
Got
them moving.
another 20 minutes.
Exactly.
You've got 20 more minutes.
20 more minutes.
It's actually interesting because we are almost second for second on schedule right now. It is actually 5:41 and you are at 5:39, so we're 2 minutes behind schedule, which is pretty good, I think.
There's 4.
This is in Waterloo though, an hour ahead. We nearly had a bit of a.
You made me think because I've got that radio to
sorry to scare you. But we nearly had a bit of a mix-up. We found out yesterday that Terry was working to 11:30 kick-off British time, and we were working to 11:30 kick-off Waterloo time. And so there's now a difference. So they were planning to start the refight an hour later. So we found out just in time and managed to fix the problem. But it's time zones do cause interesting problems.
My orders are currently being ignored.
You ordered them to charge right into those thousands of Prussians.
Can you order them just to advance in that general direction? Because all you really want to do is push them into square.
Can you shoot somebody? You know, Captain Manning style. Shoot him, Mr. Manning.
Issue order forcefully. the order?
So
No.
far so good.
No, they just took a few steps and thought, no.
So you would really rather go home.
Maybe bring. Where's your commander's already very close, so it's not going to get.
Lead from the front.
They don't seem too keen to advance. Oh, there we go.
Excellent.
They're off. Right, come on, let's see if we can get some of these Prussians into square. That would slow down the Ross anyway. What's happening on the left-hand side? That's Prussian cavalry.
Charge.
They don't care about your cavalry, do they?
Oh,
That square is being driven away from the
it
front.
is. They don't seem to want to charge at
How
all.
can we encourage these guys to charge, Bart? Well, even just to
I
force
tell
these
you,
guys
get
into square.
another unit of French cavalry and charge them in the rear.
Maybe if they had some support, they'd be more confident.
I mean, your troops are loyal, but really
They're not
just the
super
suicide charge is a lot to ask.
They're not even, the Prussians are so convinced they're not going to charge, they're not even leaving their line formation. Oh, more Prussian cavalry coming on the flank. This is the digital, this is Scourge of Waterloo, computer game that we released last week. We're refighting the entire battle through this and through the tabletop. So, yeah. No, this is 200th anniversary, so we're refighting, and this is broadcasting live. So we're broadcasting. So just for anyone who's listening, we're just talking to one of the journalists just kind of going. If you come around this side, you can see what's going on. So Matt here is playing the game, and this is being broadcast live. And then we have another camera on the tabletop game next door, and that comes out in the broadcast in the corner. And when we're switching to show there, the game goes into a little window up there. A little window showing us down here. We've got audio feeds coming from us and from the game. And this has been broadcasting live since 10:30 this morning when the battle started. So we've been going for 6 hours now. So far we've had 35,000 people watching. So yeah, pretty good. A lot of people have been logging in. Yeah, go for it. Yep.
You could say it's our way of commemorating it.
Indeed. We haven't quite got up to the number of people involved in the battle yet.
And
I'm disappointed they didn't tune in to watch, actually, anyone who was involved.
later this evening, when the games, just before the games start, I don't know, go through the medical practice, I would propose a 2-minute silence for people who died.
That's a very nice proposition. So yes, we later on, Ian Dickey's going to be showing us some of the surgeon's equipment and medical equipment that would have been at the time, which is probably going to be pretty horrifying. I would attempt not to pass out, but I have been.
You wouldn't be the first. You wouldn't be the first to pass out.
I'm very squeamish. I've never been any good as a soldier.
These have fought valiantly.
You are getting whittled away there,
I
Matt.
am, but
Where's your personal commander?
my reinforcements.
Oh, you've got more men coming. More meat to the grinder.
I sent them out.
Where's you
Excellent.
personally? Because you can see how many men you've got left.
I'm
haven't
here,
you?
right at the front.
Select your.
That's the
So
front,
you
is it?
have 5,000 men left out of 8,900. 9,000.
But I do believe I actually need to recruit.
Discretion is the better part of valor. There do seem to be very few French troops between you and the Prussians now.
Yeah. But now we've got fresh troops moving forward. And we have 15 minutes to play for.
15 more minutes to hold the battlefield.
15 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, get your guys information ready to receive. If you've got any cavalry you can use to stop their cavalry threatening you all into square.
I don't
Your
think
cavalry
I
all
do.
dead now.
I think all my cavalry are gone.
Well, maybe, can you not pull back to your guns then? the infantry guns have got to be a better combination than infantry on its own.
Yes. Or set the guns up where they are
Yeah, or maybe bring the guns
and
forward.
withdraw the infantry slowly.
Yes, you can pause it, but I don't think, can you issue orders when it's paused or
No,
not?
no.
So you can pause if you need a toilet break or something, but it's
I think that's the way you could go back to the other screen.
to the which screen? Sorry.
Like the opening like where we're filming the same one.
Not at the moment. No. We can get to that in a little bit, but this scenario's got another 10-15 minutes to run.
Manual of that.
Yeah, we've got the manual, or we haven't got any boxes in stock yet, do we? Don't think they've arrived.
So.
So there's a manual if that's any use.
Do you want me to move?
No.
See, get a bit
Well,
of shot.
can you get Scourge of War up on a different screen so that Steve can get a photo of it?
Yeah,
One of the screens downstairs.
Yeah, Nick has it installed.
Yeah, let's go like that.
Are you holding that?
Yeah, sure, you can take that.
Yeah.
Bring it up so I can press yes.
So
No problem.
Oh,
sorry.
You
Sorry?
do work for a company?
No, Ian is a friend that's helping out here. He's our historical advisor today. He's brought in quite a few of those artifacts, the saber, the uniform, the surgeon's equipment. Some very interesting, cool stuff. But the rest of us here, we are all Slytherin. The guys doing the battle refight, they are that's a gaming club that we know, but they're not part of the company. So it's been a real joint event. There's Reigate War Games Club, Ian Dickey's helped out, and Slytherin, and on the live feed, with the publisher of the game. So Bart was the producer and worked with the development team who aren't actually based here. Members of the development team are in the live feed. So the way it works is we're broadcasting this live now, and the guys are watching and they're commenting, and a number of the developers are in the forum answering questions to people live as they're asking them. And so people are asking us questions, and we're also answering them live in the feed here. So it's a big joint effort. There's been a lot of people involved in setting this up. So, yeah. Anything else we can help you with? Sure.
Just downstairs with a few of the artifacts.
Ian's off to do his photographic duty with the journalists. Steve's here to take the photos. I think the fame's going to his head already. So Matt, where are we at?
Right now, I'm just trying to organise my troops into some sort of.
There's a fair bit of criticism coming in from the
There is.
players. They're not impressed with our
They're not.
organisation level here.
And in fact, I would agree with that. I would put that
I
down
think
to
we have
lack of
lost
experience.
control of this battle to some
We
extent.
have. But I would put that down to lack of experience. I'm a fairly new player to this game, but I'm going to
It is
sort of try
it's
my
a
best.
big game that's very realistic simulation. So you do need to learn the mechanics and rules and know the kinds of interactions to really get the best out of it. But you did have some early wins, so it's.
I did fairly
Unless
well.
it was beginner's luck.
Maybe. I don't know.
There's a significant difference in challenge also in managing a smaller size battle or bigger ones. So the earlier battles we fought, the battles were more manageable somewhat because of the lower troop numbers. Here we see some of the biggest battles or scenarios you actually get in game, and it's easy to get completely lost in military organization here. So that's the main challenge already, is keeping your forces organized is actually half the battle. You got your artillery in a fairly nice spot right now.
Yeah.
So if you let the Prussians come closer and closer, you will get some damage on them.
Bring them back beside them. Form a line alongside your artillery. Don't think you want to sit in front of them.
Like one of the issues you have now is if you're giving orders to some like individual lines of troops, and they were getting conflicting orders from their own commanders, perhaps.
Yeah.
So that might confuse them and have them
This
move
is
around.
why I'm
Right. So
trying to spell
let's
out
get the
letters.
is it the divisional or the brigade commanders we should be issuing orders to?
You could do either, but if if you follow the proper chain of command, it would be the divisional commanders who would then delegate that to the brigade commanders, who would then delegate that to the individual lines and squares.
So the mistake Matt's making is trying to take too much micromanagement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably so, yes. You can get away with it, with doing it, even though it's not really historical, but then you have to hit the take command button. That basically says don't accept any orders from the AI, just from me.
Right.
And you
Okay.
can even altogether, how do you say, take them out of the bigger formation they're in.
Right.
So,
So you can detach them from
Exactly,
their command.
yes.
Yeah.
so doing that's also informing the commander, like, okay, you're no longer in command of this unit. I'm taking that on myself.
The other thing to bear in mind for people who think we aren't very good at the game is that when you're talking about the game and playing the game, it's really hard. It's really hard to talk and play the game at the same time, because I've done lots of Twitch feeds before, and your brain can do one or the other. You either play the game sensibly and talk mindless drivel, or you actually make sense and play the game really badly. So it's I'm not capable of doing both, so I tend to pick very simple scenarios whenever I'm playing anything on Twitch. So what's the time looking like now? We've got 8 minutes left to go.
Yeah.
So I don't know. You might just about. Depends what the actual specifics of the victory conditions were.
Well, the victory points award a certain amount of points, but the victory does take into account very much whether or not you suffered like huge amounts of casualties or how many you inflicted. It's not just about the victory points here, it's a balance between them. Also, if you generate a skirmish battle, for example, with the sandbox mode, you can choose yourself, like, do I want to have victory locations in there, and how much points should they reward? Like, what's the weight they should carry?
So what actually can you do in skirmish mode? I'm not familiar with that.
Well, in skirmish mode, you can do pretty much everything. You can you choose this a map you play on. So there is the Waterloo map, obviously. There are a couple of skirmish maps in there as well, different villages or different terrains to give a bit of variation. And then you choose the size of the battle. So you can do a brigade battle, which is the very smallest, all the way up to the army battle, which is the entire order of battle for the Battle of Waterloo.
Can you choose the forces on both sides, or a number of points, or how does the system work with selecting forces?
No, the system for selecting forces, you choose the size of the force, and then you choose your commander, and then for the enemy, a force is chosen with a similar size.
Okay.
And then the battle gets generated, and there are different modes. There is like line of sight battle, so you start very close to each other. Basically, you just spotted each other, you start fighting. There's the attack and the defend modes, in which case you start further away from each other, and you really want to send out your cavalry to scout where the enemy is and get them into the best position.
So although the game focuses on Waterloo, it can actually allow you to recreate any number of what if and alternative scenarios with the skirmish mode.
Yes, what if battles definitely, but all of it while doing the order of battle for Waterloo. So all the officers running around are all based on the Waterloo setting.
And that's playable in single player, or you can play that
That's
in
playable in
multiplayer too?
single and multiplayer. So the multiplayer, well, there's a couple of dedicated multiplayer scenarios, but also this sandbox mode where you can completely set up your own battle is available in multiplayer.
I mean,
And
that
it's also-
gives almost infinite replay value for multiplayer then with these kind of settings.
Exactly, and it's also possible to say, I want to have an army versus an army battle, so a full Napoleonic army, but I only want to play as the division commander within that. So then the AI Napoleon will actually start giving you orders, or AI Wellington start giving you orders, and it's up to you to choose, like, to what degree you want to really execute these orders, and how you will do that, how do you interpret them. So it gives a lot of freedom, a lot of replayability. You can say, I just want to have a little artillery battery and just watch the battle unfold. You
Yep.
can do that.
So just giving an update to anyone who's just joining us. We are refighting the Battle of Waterloo. It's the 200th anniversary today. We've been broadcasting live since 10:30, so that is, I make that 6.5 hours now we've been broadcasting. And we're still full of energy, so still plenty of interesting stuff left to come. So we started off with the French assault on Hougoumont, which went well, and again the French assault on Papelotte. So early in the day the French had some good successes, but since then things have not gone so well. The main French assault against the British line under D'Elron was repulsed with heavy casualties, and that led to D'Elron's corps being pushed back and pretty much taken out of the battle. His corps is spent. And then a rash cavalry charge by Marshal Ney has left a large chunk of the French cavalry spent as well. There still is a significant reserve, and the Old Guard have yet to be allocated. But the Prussians are arriving, and this is what we're looking at now. Matt here has the Lebeau's corps, and his job is to hold up the Prussians to stop them coming on the French right. And he has another 4 minutes to complete the scenario. He's taken quite heavy casualties, so whether this will be deemed as a success or not, we'll find out once we get to the end. But the Prussians are definitely making good ground. They're pushing him back, and yeah, the significant casualties. So definitely bought time, but at what price? We're not sure yet. I'm just going to go and check on the table team and see if they're ready for a check-in with us.
I definitely feel that I've scraped back a bit of dignity, I think. There was a bit of chaos when I was retreating, but now we've covered our flank over that side. We've got artillery set up so that they can forward through the woods, through the trees.
Is it worth trying to clear your front so the artillery got a nice shot up the road?
Good idea. Let's send these.
How many minutes do we have left?
3 more minutes.
3 more minutes. And then we'll see.
Conducting a retreat or a holding action like this is very tricky. So don't beat yourself up if it seems to get a bit messy and difficult. That's part of the course.
I suppose
All the armchair generals are telling us all the things we've done wrong. So they'll get their chance to try.
Yeah.
Go to the website, get the game, and show us how much better you can do.
Do better than me.
I'm not
That's the
saying
bar we're
anything.
setting.
What just happened there? Who issued
unit
orders?
wants to advance and walk around all the other units, making a very long journey.
Just going for a leisurely stroll.
So, should you be defeated, I don't really mind, because after this scenario we're switching the perspective to the Allied side. So we're actually, next scenario, we'll start playing as the Prussians and continue the offensive. It's always good to switch in time.
Yes, yes. Your timing is immaculate.
So if you're looking for a bit more information on the game, I mean, we're talking about the game continuously, but if you want to read it up on your own account, hit the banner below the stream you see, and it will take you right to the product page where you can get all kinds of information, as well as links to videos, links to the forums where people already got it are discussing the game, the pros and cons, etc. So that's a great way to get more information on the game, get up to speed on what it is, how it works. And of course, if you want to grab it after seeing this footage, that's the place where you can buy it from as well. So the game comes in a digital version and a box copy, depending on what you prefer. And you can, even when you buy the box copy, you'll get a download code as well, so you can start playing immediately while waiting for your box copy to arrive.
One of the coolest things on this one as well is that the box copy is only $5 more. You get the box, you get the printed full color manual, you get your game disc, and you get a digital download, and it's only an extra $5, so you just should do it.
And all
Simple.
prices are including VAT, aren't they?
Yep, everything's including VAT, so that's, yeah, the price you see is the price you pay. So we're just about, oh my goodness!
Kind of saw that coming,
It's
didn't I?
all gone horribly wrong for the
Yeah.
French.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Dear, oh dear.
I'm not sure it's a very different situation next door, to be honest. So
Is it not?
we're going to go. You can talk us through your defeat and look at the details, and we'll just get ready to receive the update.
So Matt, where did you go wrong? Waking up?
Turning up, yeah. I have a feeling that I wasn't able to get my men in their proper positions to build that defensive line in between the wooded areas, and I wasn't able to utilise the cannons as much as they probably should be. Yeah, so it's got a negative form of water.
Right, so that's a great time to switch sides and join the Allies. Also, should be known that in these scenarios, the AI is hardly scripted at all, so it will devise different strategies every time you play and react to the way you play in different ways. So you never have, or very rarely have a feeling of playing the exact same scenario again if you're the one making different choices.
Right, we're switching over to the other side now.